there are a few styles of music which require you to constantly work on yourself, not just as a player, but also your personality, your thought, your philosophy, etc. Right? That is the beauty of our country. Right? That is the beauty that this region sounds like that. Then you go to South, and then there are different regions where even their sound is slightly different from each other. These are musical dialects, right?
Yeah.
Right? In that, like, when you're just like literally in that moment, you're on stage with your instrument, you have a basic idea of a certain, like, you have a basic structure in your head which you're aware of. But then when the moment comes, it's you against the laws of nature.
Welcome to the Digital Mindmeld. Yeah, so like we've been friends like over a decade now, I think.
I think a
Right?
little more than that.
A little more than
Probably
that.
more than that. Yeah, like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have been friends since before I went to college, which was in
yeah,
2014. At least like
yeah.
2 3 years before.
2013, 2014. Yeah,
14 is when I went to college. So we have been friends for at least 2 3 years before that. So well over 10 years for sure.
correct. Like I have watched your musical evolution firsthand, right? Like, I mean, so for the audience who is meeting you for the first time, like, how would you describe your relationship basically with music, like the framework with which you're doing music? Yeah, maybe we can start there first and then
It's a
go on.
bit of a interesting story in the sense that I actually never liked music, dance, and all of these things when I was young. But around that class, let's say 5 6, around that time, I had gone to this one concert, not concert rather, but Millennium Park, right, in Calcutta.
Right.
Yeah, so I had been there. We used to go there quite a bit actually, and one of those nights, Lokhichar was playing.
Mm.
Yeah, and that was the first time I actually heard live music. And I started enjoying, like my foot was moving, so I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying it and all of that. And then eventually, at one point, my uncle like gifted me and my brother one of those portable radios. Because we did not have
Oh,
MP3 players yet. At that point, MP3 player was more of like a luxury at that point. So yeah, I started off with that. We used to listen to all of these different radio stations at night. My brother listened to his, I listened to mine with earphones. Then eventually, Bollywood movies were obviously a thing, right? The first cassette my uncle got for me was, Kaho Na Pyar Hai, that Hrithik Roshan movie.
yeah.
So that was
Right. What that
basically.
island? Something happened in an island. I completely forgot.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
particular one, and that's when like I heard music in its physical form. Like, rather like I touched music in its physical form. And then eventually in school, I like you had we had to choose extracurricular activities, right? So you had choice of you had the same thing like football and all of these things. So my brother was already learning mandolin at school, so I chose mandolin as well. Now for about 4 years, I learned mandolin. I got bored. Then a friend of mine, he used to really, just make fun of that instrument. It's like, you play a little balloon kind of a thing. And he used to play. And I was like, you know what, you give me a year, I'm gonna get myself a guitar and I'm just gonna just show you where to go, whatever. I'm trying not to use bad words.
I mean, you are free to use whatever you want to.
Oh
This is
yes,
a
I'll just
free
take your advice.
platform.
Like, so I'll just open up a little bit more over there. And then that's basically how the guitar journey started. And it started off more with me borrowing an acoustic guitar from my neighbor downstairs and on the second floor. And she also taught me my first couple of chords, which were a D major and a G major. Like this particular G major where you're holding with that and that. So these were the first two things that I learned on the guitar, and then for
Maybe Brian Adams.
that came a little later.
Okay.
Because around that time we didn't really have like a high-end computer or anything at home. We had like one of those Windows 98 40 GB hard disk, and I think that particular one had 512 MB RAM probably.
Alexa, stop, stop. Sorry, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that
Yeah.
particular computer had 512 MB RAM. But somehow my brother has always been into computers, so he managed to install Guitar Pro on it. And that is where
Okay.
like learning tunes actually began. That is where I think some of the first tunes I learned were Wake Me Up When September Ends and then Summer of '69. Then eventually, for like the next 2, 3 years, I worked on a few more songs like Glasgow Kiss, 2, 3 Bullet for My Valentine tunes, those kind of things. Like I was still in that mix of
Teenage.
pop, metal, some rock and roll kind of vibe going on. And then at one point, my school guitar teacher asked me to go to Omidotto. Omidotto, you know who Omidotto is. You've learned from
Yeah.
him yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Amit sir really opened up a lot of like doors for me in terms of just listening to music, like he introduced me and everybody else in the class. He introduced us to a lot of Mahavishnu Orchestra, Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass. These were names I think I first heard of them in his class. But also, Google was still pretty new, and I used to Google like interesting things like world's greatest guitar player, like fastest guitar
Yeah.
in the world.
And who was it?
Uh,
Eddie Van Halen? Or
Eddie Van Halen was there, but it was always Hendrix on number one for some reason. I love Hendrix too, but like I was like, okay, fastest guitar is Hendrix number one. Whatever. Like that's like a conversation for a different day. But yeah, then as I kept doing that, at one point I landed up on Alan Holdsworth. That is like and I'm like, okay. And like the way I actually started listening to him was I first saw a picture of him, and it was literally a picture of him with a massive stretch like that. I don't know.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's a
It's
popular
a
picture
pretty
of Alan
yeah, it's
Moore.
a pretty famous picture of him. And I'm like, okay, what is that? Then I searched him up on YouTube and I'm like, okay, what is this guy? Right. And then that is where like going deeper into music began. Right. Because at that point it wasn't really about D chord, G chord, major scale, pentatonic scale or anything for me anymore. It was more of like how do these things work? Why do we have these little terms that we're trying to discuss? And then somewhere down those lines, my parents also, like my parents have been ridiculously supportive of these things. So at one point, they recognized that I was pretty serious about these things, and we started applying to
So
music.
what was the turning point? Like, how did you change their mind? Like, I mean, into such a thing? Because I mean, I'm also from the same city where you are from, right? So I know the struggles of like taking music as a career, right, which you have chosen, right? I mean, you usually get to hear plenty of negativity, basically, surrounding that kind of uh, argument or discussion. Like, I want to like know understand also a little bit about the headspace of your parents. Like you say that they were supportive, and tell me a little bit about that because that is a big thing, man.
It was more about, see, negative things we were hearing anyway, like
Oh yeah, yeah.
you're
I
playing
mean, even today you will hear it, I guess.
Yeah, you're not playing Robindra Sangeet, you're not playing Indian classical music, you're trying to play rock and roll. So there's negativity all around you. Right. But then I guess my parents would be able to understand better, but what I would guess is, like, rather, my parents would be able to say it better than me, but then what I would guess is that, unlike a lot of other people in school, I used to go to school, come back home, practice. I hardly ever had any social life. I mean, you are one of the very few people I have met outside of school. And even I think like anytime you and I had met, it was also like pretty random. And we had
Very random.
yeah, and like we had probably met like through Spondon, our mutual friend.
Yeah,
I think that's how
mutual
we
friend.
met. And
Nice.
Spondon was my school friend. I knew him since like I've known him since class three. Right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and even he was a little bit into music as well. So yeah, but eventually coming back to the topic, yeah, I used to come back home and literally just practice for the rest of the day. And at one point, my dad used to go to China quite a bit, like specifically Taiwan. So it's not China actually, but he used to go to
Sure.
Taiwan quite a bit, and sometimes he also used to go to places like Shenzhen and Hong Kong. And my brother and I used to ask him to get things because he used to get things really cheap back then, like
Mm,
you don't have to pay duty and all of these things.
mm,
So you get
mm.
things for pretty cheap over there. And this one time I asked him to get me a guitar processor, right? And
Okay.
before this, there was another part which I'll come to in a bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
he got me a Zoom G2 1U. That was, and I still remember that because like I was on call with him and he was at the store where a guy was like playing through that process and he was ripping it, man. He was absolutely ripping it, like too good, like absolutely ballistic of a player, whoever that guy was. But
It
yeah,
was an audio call, I believe.
sorry, yeah, it was an
It
audio.
was an audio
Or yeah,
call.
Skype wasn't really a big thing back then.
Sure, sure, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if Skype was even there. I'm guessing Skype was there. Just we didn't
It,
really have a webcam. Let's
yeah,
just
yeah,
say.
yeah. I mean,
But
that's a very interesting experience, right? Like even sometimes I think back to myself, like like being born in the 90s, right? There used to be just one telephone in the locality
yeah, yeah, a landline.
initially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And slowly everybody had one in their houses, but
No, I
yeah, and
can
now
relate to that because at this point, like I didn't have a cell phone at that point. We just like if my friends needed to contact me, they would just call me on the landline and we'd talk if we have to. But the part which I told you that happened before this G2 1U was this was another trip where my dad went to Taiwan, and this time he had gotten me a Sony Ericsson phone. Okay.
okay,
Now, my uncle, sorry, one of my brother-in-laws, he also had a Sony Ericsson flip phone, right? My uncle liked that, and my brother-in-law liked the phone that I got. So I cut him a deal where like I'll give you this phone in exchange for your phone and 3,500 rupees. Right? Or 3,500 or like 4,500, one of the two. I don't exactly remember. But yeah, so he's like, done. He gave me that money in cash and I gave him the phone. He gave me his phone. Then my uncle was right there. I'm like, you like this phone, right? I'll sell it to you for either again 3,500 or 4,500. One of them was 3,500, one of them was 4,500. That's all I remember. I just don't remember which one was what. Right. So now
right.
I had enough money to buy myself a local electric guitar and a Chinese phone. Right. So at that point, my dad had an employee who used to live in Khidirpur area. So over there, you have Fancy Market. So he
Yeah.
took me to Fancy Market, and there was a music store there called Roland. So over there, we told him like
Was it the real Roland or
I wasn't sure. I think I was too young to know that.
okay?
But
Yeah.
I am fairly sure it wasn't Mustaq who was with me, who was like one of the main guys there around that time. It was
Right.
someone else. But regardless, we gave him our budget and he got me a Grayson electric guitar, which I still have here. I'll show
Yeah, 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 yeah. Maybe you can show it to us.
This was the guitar.
Ah, ah,
Now,
ah.
obviously, this is
Yeah.
not the stock condition, and neither is it in working condition right now. But this was the guitar
Right,
in
right.
pristine working
Whoa.
condition. And
Right.
it originally came with a hardtail. Then I switched to tremolo system, cheap one from Braganza. But anyway, keep this aside for the timing. So I got that guitar
Nice.
and a Chinese phone, which had মানে Apple iPhone was fairly new at that point, so it had a similar looking UI, but yeah, it wasn't Apple, obviously. And it was extremely thick. It was like about this thick. This is my phone now. It was literally that thick.
Correct.
And it came with a light pen, a place to store the light pen in the phone. It also had a
Mm.
physical QWERTY keypad along with a touchscreen, and it had an analog watch at the back which said Rolex, Lix, Rolix.
Okay.
Battery and the battery life of that phone was, I think, about 5.5 days or something like that. And it had the lowest
Okay.
speakers I've ever seen in my life, like ever heard in my life. So whatever. And then from there, like then the practicing began, obviously, because electric guitar, then eventually a guitar processor. Guitar processor means now I have access to distortion, right? So that's where like more of that rock and roll, a little bit of wannabe metal stuff began. And I got introduced to effects like delay, reverb, etc. And
What about amp?
amps, I never had an amp until I went to college, actually. I never owned one.
Okay.
So I always used to actually connect. So I didn't have an
To a
audio
speaker.
interface either. It's just that back then all of these desktops had a microphone input at the back. So I
Yeah.
had gotten a quarter inch to 3.5 converter and taken the output from the processor into the mic input. And from one of those like torrent websites, I had downloaded a wave recorder, which literally used to
Yeah.
record in wave. Right. And over there, like I used to control the output level from the processor only, just to make sure it didn't clip. And I used to just like record myself and learn tunes from Guitar Pro. And eventually, my school teacher suggested my parents that they should take me to Amritsar, and then Amritsar introduced me to all of those things. And then I got deeper.
And this is around like class 10 or more.
This was around, yeah, like 10, 11, 10, 11, like around that time. Then simultaneously, I was also taking vocal lessons from my aunt. She used to teach, she used to just like do vocal warm-ups with me, some Hindustani classical, and she had also taught me like two, three Rabindra Sangeet tunes. But really, my main reason to take vocal lessons was so that I can make better guitar lines. Okay. She wished I took up vocals more seriously, but I ended up taking up guitar a lot more seriously. And but yeah, definitely taking vocal lessons made a huge impact in my journey altogether, for sure. Because whenever I used to try and learn solos or even try and come up with ideas for soloing or improvisation, being able to sing really helps you translate what you're hearing in your head into your instrument, as long as you have like a fairly good understanding of the dynamics of that instrument, of course, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So yeah, again, coming back to the topic, that happened, and then eventually, after applying to a bunch of colleges, I ended up getting accepted by Berklee College of Music and Leeds College of Music. Now, at that point, it was really more of like my dad's like, see, it's one opportunity. I'm not gonna send you to both colleges. So now you have to decide where do you want to go, because this is not gonna happen again and again. So yeah, obviously I chose Berkeley. Right. Now it was for the next 5 to 6 years of my life. It was pretty intense in terms of
Mm.
musical
Mm.
training, in terms of balancing things out, in terms of just relationships with my family, because of obviously, like, under pressure, they are also going through pressure in the work life. I'm going through pressure in my college life. There are gonna be some tensions here and there, but after, and there were multiple times during those years when I had just felt like quitting. I like literally called up my parents in the middle of the night and I'm like crying, and I'm like, I want to go back to India, I don't want to stay here, and all that. It was partly because It's a lot of expense. It's pretty expensive to study and live abroad. And it can get in, you're doing that, so you know exactly what I mean.
Sure.
Living by yourself away from your family for like a year at a stretch, and then only being able to see them for a few, maybe a month, month and a half, and then again coming
Max.
back. And then college also has its own negativity and everything, which is fine. I mean, I'm not that bad at dealing with negativity, but all of that combined, there were times when you felt like just quitting. And I'm keeping college pressure aside. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, I'm gonna come to that. I'm gonna dive deep into these nitty gritties because
Yeah,
this is
that's a
where a
different
lot of
conversation.
interesting things are. Yeah, yeah. Go on,
But yeah,
please.
that happens. I finished college. Then I worked in the US as a teacher, like as an educator, and also I used to perform over there, I used to play with wedding bands, and I used to perform some local gigs, like bar gigs, etc., and sometimes some private gigs here and there. I also used to work as a part-time technician, like an equipment tech. This basically started as a work study job only while I was in college. So it was my part-time job where every morning 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. was my work slot. So I had to go to all the rooms in Berkeley, as many rooms as I could, and check all of the electronic equipments over there, like from
Okay.
projectors to computers, all of the Mac, because most of the rooms had a Mac Mini connected to a bunch of electronics like projectors and also your, what do you call it? You know those desk view cameras?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
all of
So
those.
where you write and the notes basically
Correct. The
just
notes are on the board. Yeah. It just
sure, sure,
displays
sure.
it through a projector.
Very common in a university
Yeah.
setting. Yeah.
So like my job was to go through every room, check those, along with going through all of the ensemble rooms and checking amps, digital pianos, electric organs, bass amps, etc. All of these things, making sure if they're working or not. If they're not working, I carry them back, I get them fixed, then I carry it back to the room and reset it again wherever it was. So that was my job, and my boss liked me. So he used to call me even after I graduated, like that 1 year I was there. So now this 1 year that I worked there was basically under what they call OPT, optional training period. So
Okay.
depending on what your major is, your OPT can be between 1 to 3 years. And this is essentially a time period where, as a graduate, you can work legally in the United States and you can try and search for a job, which in turn will help you get a work visa or a green card, whatever. There are, of course, other ways of getting a green card as well, but finding work is obviously the more important thing because you have to make a living.
Of course, of course, of course, of
Now
course.
the problem there is like after applying, I think I had applied to well over 100, 200 jobs for sure. And I had gotten quite a few appointments also. The only issue was none of them could really hire me since I needed a work visa. Work visas are actually pretty expensive for the employer. And if the employer is given a chance, why will they choose an immigrant than somebody from their own country where they do not have to pay this particular thing, right? So most of my friends ended up getting an artist visa, which for me it was a little too expensive, so I never really tried getting into that. Uh, but yeah, eventually I came back to India around 2019. I think
Yeah, yeah.
towards the middle part of 2019 or something like that.
Just exactly the time when I came here.
Yeah, exactly. I think we had spoken in between also quite a few times, probably.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I remember. I want to come there as well. I mean, yeah, yeah. But let's maybe try to basically go back a little bit at Berkeley because you're like I mean you touched upon many different things, right? And I know you personally, so I might even actually have to ask you things that I already know about what exactly. But yeah, yeah. So because I mean you have to tell us a little bit about how exactly is the weather at Berkeley College of Music, right?
I hate it.
And
I think it's I think
right,
it's
the
one of the
winters
worst winters
and
and the worst winter ever to have been recorded. at that time. It was literally the coldest winter. I hated it over there. The summers, I must say, were actually pretty nice. Uh, they were much more livable. You know, like summers were between 21 degrees Celsius to around 32 degrees Celsius. But the winters, man, the winters were between like minus, like not minus 8, but like let's say between 2 to minus 26, 27, like that. It's like living in a refrigerator, man. And you have to go to college in that cold. And then snow. No matter what people say, living in snow is not a beauty. It's beautiful to look at. It's not beautiful to live with at all. Your socks get drenched. They start
Yes.
stinking after a point. And as a college kid, I was definitely like not the most organized college kid at all. So I used to lose my shit on that, man. It's absolutely.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, because I want to also like talk to you about the mind-body aspect of music, right? Because body plays a very important role. I mean, like if you're completely unhealthy, right? Like, and which is very common, unfortunately, in the musical world. Like, health is not the first thing I see well taken care of by musicians. So, I mean, but I'm also a musician. I play guitar, right? So, I mean, as what I feel is that health is very optimum. It's very much important. I mean, you have to basically, I think you have to work out probably if you want to have gigs for a longer period of time. And if you want to have it nicely, like if you don't want to struggle with that kind of setting. And about the snow part, what you mentioned, right? Like it's very common that like it happens to me that like I'm rushing probably to a class or something, already sweaty inside, but outside it's freezing, you know so
The health part that
yeah.
you mentioned also, I mean, I'm definitely not the healthiest person out there, especially in the past couple of years, I've gained quite a bit of weight. But before those past couple of years, I had lost about 13, 14 kilos also. I used to work out every morning for about 4 months. And it worked pretty well. Like, I was very regular. But then I went on one little tour and then I came back, nothing was the same after that. So since then, I haven't worked out. But what I have felt is that at least to some extent, physically speaking, if you keep some kind of physical activity on at least, you won't struggle as much. Like I am,
Right, right, right,
even though
right.
my like music education is one of my main avenues of income, I do make it a point to have as many gigs as possible. Because obviously these gigs would have to have physical activity. Sometimes I will
Yeah,
make
yeah,
it a point to literally carry a hard case instead of carrying a gig bag, just because that's a little more, just labor intensive comparatively.
yeah,
Sometimes I'll
yeah.
just take the staircase while coming upstairs, and all of that. And as far as I think the mind part for me is probably a little bit more important. Like,
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
of course,
because I want to come like address it in a frame, let's say, which I kind of see it, right? So there's a Hollywood style of portraying a creative person, right? Very hyper neurotic, always like I mean, itching their heads or something like that, always under stress, kind of very much, like a Goodwill Hunting kind of a guy, or maybe this. Yeah, and Beautiful Mind, right? Like that kind of a headspace where like they're half schizophrenic probably already. But there's also another kind of creativity which comes from Bach, right? And Bach as a human being was very gentle and calm. He was not neurotic at all.
right,
He was actually the opposite of neurotic. He was very steady on the ground and productive, like extremely productive, right? So how do you basically see this? Because there's a stigma about this. Like if you were into this particular business, right? Like oftentimes in the past, due to lack of education, I think it went very bad. Like for instance, like what happened to Jaco Pastorius, right? Like such a big player was beaten to death, And
I was
I
also a
mean,
drug addict, picking fights with people, and at the same time, I'm not completely sure about like how he died, but I believe he also had a reputation to really get pretty highly intoxicated. I might be wrong.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, no, that is, you're correct. You're completely correct. And that's exactly where I want to like point out that the creative avenue, I can understand that some of it comes through rejection, pain, and suffering, because when you are happy, you are just happy, you just don't care much. Your mind is just blank most of the times, maybe, but most people don't appreciate the part of when they're happy. And but when you're sad, suddenly you're basically very appreciative of even a cup of tea, right? Like someone offers you that and you're just like, it's a sign that God is giving me something or something like that. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but the point is that this is exactly how people basically get into drugs, right?
right.
And so I want you to basically kind of reflect a little bit on this. Like there's Bach, right? Almost like a god, like a Buddha, who is completely grounded, like a martial arts guy. And then there is this guy, Jaco Pastorius, or Hendrix, maybe, or Kurt Cobain, right? So what exactly did this feature? Because they definitely got popular. All of these people had made their contributions, right? uh, Jim Morrison. Then yeah, you can go on and on. I mean, everyone had certain Miles Davis himself, right, as well.
Yeah.
So what's your take on this part of the mind? Like, I mean, is it a short-term pleasure thing that is the thing? Is it a hardware thing you feel, or is it just a software, or is it community driven? Like, what is what and now it's changing a little bit with education, definitely, but it is not 100% transformed, definitely.
Right.
Yeah. So
I
thoughts, yeah.
definitely have thoughts on it. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I think
Yeah.
this is probably gonna be one of the longest conversations that you're gonna have.
So I want to actually rephrase the question just so that like it we are back in the context. So there are certain bad habits, right, which people kind of have. Uh, of course, drug abuse is definitely one of them, but I would also like to include being late. Okay, this is something.
That is an addiction for sure.
No, this is I really dislike this aspect personally. I am not late. I don't come late basically, right? I try to be on time. If I'm not on time, maybe 5 minutes here or there. Yeah,
Right.
but I definitely don't want to make it more than 5 minutes, right? But I mean, my impression has been that I have waited sometimes for hours, like I've given, I mean, a time that we agreed upon, right? And so, yeah, I mean, what is your take on the fact that there exists people like Bach, there exists people like, let's say, Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia in the Indian classical context, right? Who are completely grounded to reality, right? And there is another kind of a culture that emerged out of the 70s and even earlier, definitely, who were also into all these things, basically, right? So I can understand a few things. For instance, you mentioned that you are not super organized. That's definitely a personality trait, right?
In college,
Organization.
now I'm organized.
You're organized. Okay.
In
Okay.
college,
No,
it
I also
wasn't
thought.
as organized. There were certain things which were organized. For example, practice routines, etc. Or like keeping, like I've always been very organized with my instruments. With
Uh,
myself, laundry, etc., I wouldn't say I was always organized. And I think that partly has a lot to do with the fact that you and I have both grown up in Calcutta. We've always had maids do that for us.
yeah, that's a very big culture shock
I
actually
was
for
just
these folks.
spoiled over there. That's all. But at the same time, at some point, obviously, I had to do that for myself. So it did teach me things. But to answer your question,
Yeah, yeah,
there's
please.
there's a saying that I had learned at one point: train yourself to be a beast, and then learn to control yourself. So now when you're mentioning people like Pandit Hariprasad Chaurasia, or you're mentioning, let's say, people like Zakir ji, Ustad Zakir Hussain, right?
Sure.
These are people who are quite literally that, if you think about it. You know, in different contexts, Khatri Govan is another such example. So I think Bach was probably that, you know,
Hmm?
where
Hmm?
he got grounded over a period of time. He was probably not grounded throughout. I mean, who
Sure.
will know? Because we are talking about the 18th century over here. But then
Yeah.
at least like from my whole journey so far, that's what I have understood. Because I've taken lessons from people who are very, very grounded. But I've also taken lessons from people who are completely like weird, out of the box, man. Like there is no word to explain what they're like. But they all had one thing in common, that is on their instrument they were free, right? Free in the sense like everybody doesn't know everything for sure. Every human being is gonna have some level of limitations in terms of their ability, you know right? Like let's say you can be super skinny but you probably can't win an arm wrestling match with the great Khali, you know what I mean? And so there'll always be some kind of a trade-off, right? Now, the
Sure.
I won't say the trick, the decision that one has to make is which trade-off are they trying to do? Which trade-off are they trying to make? Right? Like for me, as much as I love Yngwie Malmsteen, I have not put in enough time in my journey to play like him. As much as I love John Petrucci, I have not put in enough time to learn his style, his sound, right? What I have, however, put time behind is listening to a lot of Miles Davis, listening to a lot of Charlie Parker, listening to a lot of Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, Ted Green, Tim Miller. I learned from Tim Miller myself, David Fizenski. I learned from him as well, and a lot of other people, right? And at one point I used to have something called my favorite musician, but as I kept progressing in my journey, I didn't have a favorite musician, and eventually I didn't have a single favorite musician.
Sure. Sure.
Because the thing is, after a point you realize that it's all expression, right? Some of it can be very painful, some of it can be, like you said, happy, right? Um, but they're famous anyway. I'll come to the fame part in a bit, but the philosophy part I want to talk about more, because I think the fame part is a little bit more controversial compared to the
Yeah.
philosophy part of art in general.
Or maybe the discipline side of things, let's say.
Yeah, I think discipline plays a huge part in it. Like for me, you know me for a long time, so I used to smoke quite a bit. I also used to drink quite a bit. But I have been completely clean for the past 6 plus years.
Hmm.
6 plus years. I quit in 2020, like right when COVID hit. So right now it's 2025. So like just over 5 years, I guess. Right. So I've been completely clean for just over 5 years. And what I have felt is one, a much sharper mind. I have always been crazy about being on time anyway, but then I feel like I've been a lot more productive by removing all that toxins from my life altogether.
Understand.
Like to a point where like I will literally pour a peg for my friend, but I won't have it. I will roll a cigarette for my friend, but I won't have it. If they can smoke and like throw the smoke right on my face, I will still not have it. Right? And it takes a bit of time to really bring that control, right?
Yeah.
And the only trade-off there was when you quit drinking and smoking, you also lose out on a lot of friends, right? Because if you think about it, when we are going out to smoke or when we are going out for hookah or whatever, drinking, whatever you're doing, you are essentially doing that as a social thing. You're being social. For if you're doing it by yourself, that's bad. If you're finishing a whole liter of alcohol by yourself at home, you you need to go to a therapist, probably,
Sure,
right?
sure,
But
sure.
I'm talking about in general, right? In general, even if you're getting drunk 5 days a week, but you're like getting drunk with friends, you're doing it because you're trying to be social. That's what your friends are doing, or that's what people around you are doing, and you're joining that.
So
So
why is this immaturity? Like, I mean, you find, like, I'm pretty sure that as a teenager, there comes a rebel inside us, right? That we want to rebel. We don't want to follow the norm, right? We want to put this collar up or something like that, just to make a point that we don't follow the rules, right? But as you grow up, right? Like, I mean, what's stopping? What's the impedance that's there in the culture that's stopping from socializing without these kind of substances or without this kind of setting, like
I
the
think the
treatment?
substances are a little stronger in this case, like as in it it's probably become a part of socializing because these substances have a strong presence in general, right? Like for example, if you think about it, it all actually comes from peer pressure, to be very honest, right? Addiction comes first and then comes peer pressure, right? You smoke a cigarette, the first few times you can't smoke it, right? You're gonna cough like crazy. But eventually, you actually, like when I quit smoking, it wasn't nicotine which I missed because I had tried nicotine gums also, right? So it
Okay.
wasn't nicotine that I missed. It was the feeling of me taking a drag, inhaling that, and letting that smoke out. Right. And the alternative to that is actually smoking e-cigarettes, which I think are
Is even
probably more
worse.
dangerous. And you actually end up spending more money because I did actually spend some time with e-cigarettes too. Because in the US at one point, Juul, there's this thing called Juul. So Juul was like really popular at one point. So my friends and I used to smoke that all the time, but we actually ended up spending a lot more money on that. And every single one of us eventually switched back to normal cigarettes. Right? So it was really that smoking part which you actually missed, right? Now, over there, for me at least, my reason for quitting were two reasons. One, COVID hit, my cigarette guy ran away, so I had nobody to buy cigarettes from. Second, my laptop at that point had given up on me, and I figured that the amount of money I'm spending behind drinking and smoking, I could actually take a long-term EMI on a new computer. So I ended up buying a Mac Mini with that, the M1 Mac Mini. And so when you are really putting yourself in that kind of a situation, I think the control comes more naturally in general because I know that, okay, I got an EMI to pay. If I miss that, I have to pay a penalty. Right.
Yeah.
So to avoid that penalty, I'll do my best to literally not to like to make sure that the money is there, right? So for me, at least, it was really that pressure because I had figured that you can't really ease yourself into leaving all of these things. It has to be a decision, and you have to stick to that decision, you know. And I also
Yeah.
saw that, yeah, even though you end up losing out on a lot of social I don't want to say, I don't know if I should say social acceptance. Right?
Even if you look into the performance side of things, a lot of the performance happens in bars and pubs, and
Yeah, exactly.
where,
I usually just have ginger ale. That's the only option I have. It's either ginger ale or lemonade. I'm not having
sure,
lemonade at night, you know what I mean? So, so I usually just have ginger ale or thumbs up or something like that. That's all the choice I have. But that's fine. I mean,
sure,
it's okay.
sure, definitely.
Yeah. But coming back to the conversation again, so I think what you're saying that Jaco had his addiction and then Bach was more grounded. But I think either way, it's their personalities which ended up on their music, right? If you, at least I feel it this one, correct me if you feel the same. Tell me if you feel the same way. That is, every artist, doesn't matter if it's a painter or a musician, an actor, whatever, the finest ones always seem to be themselves in their art,
Yeah.
you know. And like when I say finest, I think that's also like a matter of debate, obviously. Like some would call a very well-known pop musician fine, whereas some would call, let's say, Kurt Rosenwinkel fine. So maybe I should clear out my definition of fine. My definition of fine would be really more from the perspective of me observing that person. If this
Right.
person has a very healthy balance of a lot of things, for example, discipline, knowledge, use of knowledge, application of knowledge, right? And then how they speak to people, how they treat themselves, how they treat
Mm,
their own art, how
mm,
much effort they put behind their own art, how observant they are about other things. Like the reason I have other interests too, like I love
sure.
watching woodworking videos. Even though mostly I am a music educator and a performer, I also have interest in sound. I mess around with a little bit of synthesizers and just virtual instruments also, a little bit of mixing, a little bit of mastering. Whenever I get the time, I just get into that. Just because all I'm trying to do there is I have put my heart and soul behind one thing. Now I'm trying to connect the dots with other things, right? If you think about it, the universe works in a specific way, right? So if we really think deeply about it, everything is everything but different, if that's making sense. I don't know how much
Sure.
sense I'm making,
No,
but
no, absolutely. I
yeah,
mean,
like
definitely, you're
everything is
making full
everything
sense.
but different from each other. So, like in my mind, it's like you go deep into one thing and then you try to connect the dots with other things, which ends up opening your mind a lot more.
Absolutely.
Right. And this, when I see in somebody, I can usually tell by seeing a bunch of the finished products and having a conversation with them. Right. From my experience, the smartest and the most intelligent people I've met are actually people who don't even speak that much, apart from certain things which they're very passionate about. You know,
Yeah,
I think you can relate to what I'm trying to say over there.
totally, totally,
You
totally. I mean, yeah, yeah.
like
Yeah.
in Bengali, there's a word called "gyan papi."
Mhm.
Right. So usually if somebody is talking about my area of expertise and they're giving gyan, and I clearly know the bullshitting. This person is definitely not somebody I want to interact with much.
Right.
On the other hand, let's say actually let's take Ustad Zakir ji, for example. I had randomly, I like absolutely randomly met him at a gig, at one of my gigs in JW Marriott in Calcutta. Okay. So right after my gig, my wife was also there. She was my girlfriend then. Now she's my wife. But right after my gig, we just went to the buffet downstairs to like grab my dinner and everything. And I see Zakir ji over there. Okay, I went all ballistics, man. I'm like, I just went up to him like, can I please take a picture with you and everything. And man, the way he spoke, how funny, because he's a pretty chill guy, man. It's like you might, or one might think that just because he's an ustad, right? He's literally a legend, but there's no attitude, no nothing, no nothing, man. It's like just the coolest guy out there, coolest guy. I felt the same about John Petrucci when I randomly met him. I
Oh,
felt the
where
same.
did you meet John Petrucci?
I met Petrucci on my first day at Berkeley. Because his son actually went to Berkeley as well, and like he was enrolled on that same year. So I met him also randomly, and I felt the same with him. I felt the same with Victor Wooten. I had taken a couple of lessons with him while I was at Berkeley. He used to have this every 2 weeks or every one week. He used to have like a 2 3 hour long session which anybody could join, and it was about playing live without any charts or anything and without any preparation. So he would just randomly pick two, three people and have them play together. It's a beautiful thing, you know. And when you speak to this guy, it's just like a really nice, positive guy.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And that is where, like, I figured that, um, like that first sentence I mentioned, where you train yourself to be a beast and then you learn to control it, right? So maybe to answer your initial question, Jaco probably trained himself to be a beast, but he couldn't train himself to control himself. Whereas Bach did that, you know.
Mm.
I think Guthrie, on the other hand, has done it. Guthrie Govan, because
Yeah.
he's got immense control over the instrument, man, and he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
Right, he's a
And
funny,
he
well-spoken.
has studied English literature at Oxford. Like, I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Yeah. I
Even
mean, he's
let
one
me
of the
even
first
to
people
take away
to.
that part. ठीक है studying English literature at Oxford and then being a guitar player like he is.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
also means that he has connected the dots somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this guy is not on social media, but he plays for Hans Zimmer. Right. So I think that itself probably says a lot about the kind of genius that this guy is, right? I would actually use the word genius over here. Like every
Yeah.
name
Yeah.
I mentioned, every single one of these names are literally geniuses, right? And genius doesn't necessarily have to be disciplined per se. But what a genius does have to be is open. As in, like, what is creativity? To me, at least, it's literally just like letting go of my thoughts, seeing what comes out, right? Ideally, I would love to do that in the moment because I just feel a lot more vulnerable doing that in the moment, right? In that, like, when you're just like literally in that moment, you're on stage with your instrument, you have a basic idea of a certain, like, you have a basic structure in your head which you're aware of, but then when the
Mm.
moment comes, it's you against the laws of nature. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully put. Beautifully put.
Yeah, I actually stole that from Frank Zappa, like the last bit. But
Okay.
that's because like I could connect to it, you know.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
like for me, that is basically creativity. Um, so I'm not as much into sitting down and composing music as much as I am into just sitting down and playing. And you've known me for a while, right? We have exchanged conversations many times in the past. So, like, I've always
Yes.
been open about it. I don't know what I play. I don't know what I want to play. I just want to play, you know. And sometimes I feel that when it comes to creativity, the less I think, the more me I am, if that makes sense. You know, I
Yeah.
feel like when I'm playing live with all of my bands or my duos and everything, that is probably not as much me as I am when I'm just picking up my instrument and just playing by myself. That is probably more me.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
don't know how
Right.
we ended up here, but hopefully that answers the main.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And for the record, I have taken a few lessons from you as well. So, yeah, yeah. So that's the part which I want to kind of first get into a little bit. The part where you transition from. See, there have been several kind of transitions, right? And I think that I will go through more transitions as a musician. I'm sure that you have gone through such
Yeah,
kind of phases as well,
I
right?
feel you will go through it forever. I'm going through it right now. I've gone through it forever, actually.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
teachers have been going through it. So,
yeah,
not
yeah.
sure why I would be so special to not go through it or anyone else. I think it's really
Right,
more about determination. If you're determined enough, you'll keep, if you're determined enough, you will keep going through changes for sure. It's a,
right. How would you basically kind of phrase someone who is joining, let's say, a music school? Yeah, and like the few stuff nowadays, it's not that hard to know very complex kind of stuff, right? But from my personal experience, the digestion part and then like coming that naturalization into your fingers, like you don't exactly think a scale when you're playing, I think, right? Like it's very real time in that sense. I mean, you are, but you are not at the same time. Like, I mean,
It's more
so
of like homework that I had done in the past at one point, which has stayed. I think that's a pretty like important point that you have brought up. I think scales are probably the biggest dead end for most music students. As in, it's not the easier way to make music. Let's just put it out. It is not the easier way to make music. Music theory does not have to be as complicated as social media makes it. And the thing is like they don't then I don't think people are making music theory so complicated intentionally. It's really more of like when you're on social media and you're trying to make money out of it, or like you're trying to grow a channel, you have to stay relevant to some extent, right? And the general psychology of people is that if you're sharing something simple, most people don't really consider you to be at that level, or like they don't consider the content to be at that level, right? Whereas if you say a simple thing in a very complicated manner, you are likely to have a more serious following. A good example of this is actually, you've heard of Jens Larson. There's a YouTube channel.
yes, 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 of
Phenomenal
course.
jazz player, right? If you go
Mhm.
through his videos, there's a lot of words, man. Lots and lots of words. Lots of words. Lots and lots of visuals. Lots and lots of clips. And
Yeah.
a lot of hard work goes into each of those videos, right? However, I had seen
Uh,
this other video from a different channel where that particular guy is taking a lesson from Jens Larson. Now, if you hear the way he speaks about playing over changes, it's the complete opposite of what he actually. No, I won't say complete opposite, it's more of like just simplifying things. For example, let's say we're talking about an arpeggio, okay? You can hear
right.
the guitar,
I get.
right? So let's say I'm talking about G minor arpeggio, right? And I see that I have a G minor triad right here, right? Now, when I practice the arpeggio, should I practice it this way? Or should I actually just practice it this way enough times to make sure that my hand and my eyes and my ears know the sound and geometry of it? And then I try to use my creativity to mess around with it. Like, what if instead of playing it that way, what if I do? Then I'm getting a lot more out of it, right? Then
Yeah.
that starts sounding more like a sentence rather than a robotic word.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Maybe
basically what
before
digital.
we advance into here, like why not you give us a little bit of background on harmony based music, right? What is harmony in general, right? So that like anybody who is not a musician in a technical sense can also benefit something out of this. Yeah.
Sure.
So
So
yeah, please.
before harmony, I think we should talk about what music theory is. Music theory
Okay.
is not facts. That's what definitely it is. It's not facts. Okay? That's number one. Music theory is essentially um, an analysis of musical explanations, right? Of music till now, from whenever we can go back in time till now, right? That's what music theory is, right? Now, over time, we have narrowed down formal music education into two sectors. One is classical music, Western classical music, and the other is jazz. right? Because these are the only two styles of Western music which, at least to my knowledge, are going into the theoretical side of things in a pretty deep manner. Right. Even Hindustani classical music is more monophonic than polyphonic. What I mean by that is it's
Isn't it completely monophonic?
I mean, in a
I've
way,
never heard
no, at least
harmony in Indian classical music.
there's no harmony, but the thing is there is vocal harmony. There can be vocal harmony. So if you look at it from that perspective, it is polyphonic. Right. If you're looking at it from the perspective of just one person performing it, then I'm guessing it's, yeah, it's monophonic. But again, I'm not an Indian classical musician. But yeah, whatever little I had learned of Hindustani music, it was monophonic for sure. There was no polyphony in it. The whatever polyphony was there was basically me trying to connect the dots between jazz and Hindustani music. That's it. Just trying to fuse the two things. But I think Prasanna had done a better job of that, even though he's more from Carnatic side. But anyway, music theory. So that's basically music theory. Now harmony. Harmony is basically everything that we talk about, like all of the terms like scales, chords, arpeggios, chord progressions, all of these things fall under harmony. That's it. So it's a pretty big umbrella of things, right? And harmony is essentially, I would say, a mathematical way of analyzing a specific musical movement, like sonic movement rather, a specific sonic movement which we can transpose to a different key or make use of to create our own music or just to understand music in general, just to have some kind of a like theoretical visual or just like an understanding of that art form in general. It's like, when it comes to painting, a painter will also analyze the brush strokes, right? When they're looking at an abstract piece of art, right? They'll probably like look, oh, what if I think that brush went from up to down in that angle? They're gonna see and they're gonna look for that precision, and that is how they're going to figure whether this is just some random bullshit abstract art or whether it's an actual piece of abstract art made by an abstract artist, right? So just getting into the nitty-gritty of things, that is basically what harmony is, at least to me. Now, what I showed back there is a little tiny part of harmony, right? So,
Right.
but I completely forgot what we were talking about before.
The question that I want to basically ask for the audience is that, like, if they could have a little bit of understanding of a non-musician's perspective on harmony, right? And also to basically just the thing that you talked about, like if that could be articulated out or played out, like you mentioned about the curve, right? And one is just absolute random noise, and then there is like real feature, real phenomenon happening, real storytelling happening, right? So I mean that's a very hazy line at
It
times,
is.
right? But it's kind of understandable after you listen to music for a while, right? Like it because I remember at first, like harmony, of course, let's just put this much simply, like harmony is just many things happening at the same time, right? It's so now the fact is that, like, I mean, you can do just about anything and just call it like music, and then there is basically certain amount of investigation into it. Like for instance, like again, if you come back to the laws of physics that you were talking about, that you and laws of nature, right? So what is happening is that, like, you have eyes, you have a visual representation, you have a feeling with your hands, right, where exactly the fretboard is, yeah. You have ears, which is the most important part, definitely. Smell and taste is not super relevant unless you're Steve Vai, uh, right?
Yeah.
So, right. And so tell us a little bit about, I mean, this finesse of things. Like you go to a museum and then you find these pieces of music, like there, right? Like, I mean, I'm just imagining, let's say, at like 50 years ahead. I mean, what is going to be history? John Coltrane, Miles Davis, that's history of music. That's going to be the major things, like how classical music was studied, right? So I want to also come to that evolution, but I want to go through it a little more smoothly, right? So why not you basically kind of give us an understanding of like harmony, and then going into that kind of territory which is very chilly, very um, it's complex. It's That's one way to put it, I would say. But it's extremely appealing to a person who is used to listening to this kind of music.
I think the simplest way to put it is really we've all studied English, right?
Yeah,
But how are we able to speak English in a fluent way today with each other? You and I are not from England, we're from Calcutta, right? But
sure.
we're still able to speak English clearly. And that's mostly because in school, for a number of years, we had spent a lot of time studying literature written by other people, along with
Mm,
also creating your own literature in English language and understanding certain nitty-gritties of English language like verbs, adjectives, etc. Right? Do we think about verbs and adjectives when we are creating a sentence anymore? No. But at one point, for about 10 to 12 years of our lives, we did have to do that. Right? So that in turn, that ended up training us subconsciously to speak a
mm,
language, right? That is what music theory is supposed to be. Right? Music theory is basically a mix of that English language and English literature. Okay.
mm.
So learning how the language works and also analyzing somebody else using that language and also you creating something of your own with that language. A mix of these three things will eventually lead to a point where it's going to become second nature for you. It's like
Sure.
2 plus 2 is 4. You don't have to think why 2 plus 2 is 4.
And
Not
how would you basically in like explain playing over the changes, this particular term, in this analogy? Like,
I
can it
would
be
say in
done?
a similar way, right? Because if I have to dumb it down,
Yeah.
there is no such thing as jazz harmony or blues harmony. It's just harmony, right? The
Mm,
jazz guys, I guess, just went a little bit more in depth with it. Um, but then it's just harmony. The same harmony is used in rock music also. It's also used in pop, it's also used in blues, it's also used in country, it's also used in folk music everywhere, right? And if the player is knowledgeable enough, you will hear influences of that. It's like take a player like Tom Quayle, right?
mm,
Tom Quayle comes from more of a jazz influence.
mm.
But then when he's playing, you can clearly hear the influence of jazz. But also, doesn't he have his own sound as well? Right? Even
Yeah.
though he's a fusion guitarist, as a fusion guitarist, also he has his own sound. And he ended up influencing a lot of other people. Then there are players like Greg Howe, right? Phenomenal player. He can, like, if you see that video of him playing over Sunny and you slow it down, you actually hear how perfectly he actually plays through all the changes. He's literally nailing the changes over there. But this guy, he has also been a session guitar player for Michael Jackson. Do you hear those same lines there? No. That's because this guy went to Musicians Institute and he's also an educated musician in general, right? Who had learned that particular language of Western music and he has learned to apply it in different genres, right? So playing over changes is really that to me, where like you are still learning the basics, the ABCD of a language, right? And then you are trying to use that ABCD to create a sentence over a specified framework that has been given to you. It's like write an essay about a cow, you know,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, that's your first contribution to the literature.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
really that, right? Your framework is cow. What do you want to write? Up to you, man. You want to write about Jersey cows? You want to write about a cow being brown in color? You want to talk about cows on the roads of Bangalore? I don't know. Up to you, right?
That's right.
So
That's
that's
right.
that's how I see playing over changes.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So now the
Right.
second part of your question was basically how how do we correlate that the listenable side of music and the unlistenable side of music, right? So the way
Yeah.
I see it is "Whoa, whoa, whoa," versus "Hi, my name is Subharaj,"
Mm.
right? Now the thing is, depending on what a person is going through, it could be some kind of a special need thing. It could also be just somebody's just urge to sound weird. But like let's say I feel like sounding, oh, I'm playing an F-Gen guitar, and I just let's say I want to say it like that. What's wrong in that, right? There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong in that, right? I could
Yeah.
have also said like, so I'm playing an F-Gen guitar, right?
You're
Or I
playing
could
a?
say like, an F-Gen guitar, a guitar made by F-Gen, okay?
Yeah.
Or I could also say, "Ah, this particular guitar is made by F-Gen." I can say it like that. However the hell I want to say it, I can say it. That is basically what voice is to me, right? For some people, how I spoke towards the end is a normal way of speaking, right? It could depend on again, like I said, it could be a special needs thing or it could just be their choice. Because I have met enough people in my life who are like they will just be a dick to you just because they don't want to see you. Then they're not even bad people. They're like, yeah, I don't want to see you, just get out of my face. Just like that. You know. So instead they'll just say something stupid so that you stop talking to them altogether. And the thing is, I am guilty of doing that myself. I'm really guilty of doing that myself because sometimes you just had it. Right? So now the thing is, if let's say if even if somebody is speaking to me that way, would you say that that person sounds bad, or would you say that that person sounds different?
Right. I mean, that's definitely bad and good is at the end of the day, what is
It's very
bad for one
subjective,
might
but the
be.
thing is, most people do have a definition of bad and good, and the main definition is whatever is accepted more is good, whatever is accepted lesser is bad. That is the definition, not in my books.
That
I think
is
that's a
one
very
definition,
stupid way
yes.
of looking at it, honestly. Anything that's so narrow-minded is probably a very negative thing to have in eBay. But that is reality at the end of the day, right?
Right.
In my books, I think sophistication in art lies in a good balance between those two. I'm not saying you can become a millionaire that way. All I'm saying is that you can become a very sophisticated artist that way, right? If you're taking, like, let's say, what if I did instead of, I'll go back to that same chord, right? What if instead of just playing it like, what if I did, that's not gonna get me a Grammy. But then I can safely say that I have played something that I felt at that moment. Right. Now the question is that good or bad?
I mean, that's not a,
I
I
don't
mean,
even know
that,
what good or bad is, man. I just know that sounds interesting. This sounds
yeah,
very soulful. This sounds
yeah,
dark, man. That's how I see it, at least, right? I mean,
right,
if
right.
if I hear this sound,
That too.
I'm not to most people they're like, oh man, just stop it. What the fuck? Right? But to me, it's like, what if I played, or what if I added, or what if I added, or what if I added like another, let's say, yeah, then it ends up building into something, right? And this philosophy is coming from something that David Fizenski had once taught me, And like I've heard other people say it also, that if you're making a mistake, instead of chucking out that idea, think about how you can make it work. You know what I mean? Only
Mm.
then you can actually learn to use dissonance and consonance together and bridge that gap, right? That's really what we're talking about. We're basically talking about dissonance and consonance. Dissonance is bad, consonance is good. That is essentially what people are liking or disliking. Sorry, disliking or liking, respectively, right? They may not be using that term, but then that is the reality. I don't think dissonance is bad. I think, in fact,
Sure.
sometimes consonance can be bad too. Let's say you're at a
Sure.
funeral and you're playing a happy birthday song, man. No.
That's gonna be.
Consonance also has its bad moments as well, but nobody thinks about that, right? And why do they not think about that?
They want to avoid pain.
Yeah, right. We have to see reality for reality. I'm not saying that pain doesn't hurt. We've all had our moments of pain and everything, right? I have two rabbits. I know that one day they're gonna leave me. But the thing
Mm.
is, I'm gonna try and rejoice the moment that I have with them instead. Right? And when that
Mm.
moment comes, of course, I'm gonna be devastated. Or like when our parents go, at some point our parents will also go, and we are all
Yeah.
gonna be devastated about it. But then
Yeah.
make the best of your time, right? So why should I think of consonance as dissonant and dissonance as like good thing, bad thing?
Sure.
It's a reality. That's what it is. So I see music as life. What life is, music or art is literally a representation of that in a more abstract way. That's how I see music.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
Now, in life, I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, man, when I was in class 8 and 9, because I love cars. I'm literally wearing Fast and the Furious t-shirt right now.
Okay.
Right. I love cars. Do I own a lot of cars? No. Maybe if one day I'm a billionaire, I might. But then at the moment, no. But the car that I have, I love it. I love driving it. You know, it gives me
Right.
a lot of happiness. Does that mean that my car is bad just because it's not a Lamborghini? So then why should that be considered bad?
Sure.
Ideally,
Sure.
why it will be considered bad? Because it depends on the player and how they're playing it and the
Yeah.
intent that they're putting behind these notes. Right? If your intent is only not there, how can you make that sound good? Like, what if instead of just like randomly playing it like that, sorry, what if I played like this? So I started somewhere and I went somewhere. But you heard this sound? You also heard that? It was part of that journey, right? We weren't perfect all the time. We weren't perfect since the time we were born. Why should your art be perfect since the time it's born? Is my point, right?
Right, 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 right. Like I completely can resonate that because recently, like I was going through certain aspects of Aristotelian philosophy, right? And Aristotle has this very binary kind of a mindset. Either it's here or here, right? So nothing in between. Nothing can exist in between. That was his mentality, basically. And Plato's idea was basically that, like, thought is even much more superior than reality, right? Like in thought, you can make anything perfect, right? But in the real world, that's what matters, basically. That's what kind of matters. And yeah, yeah. I mean, one funny example I'm reminded of is this particular YouTube guy called Samurai Guitar,
Oh yeah.
right?
He makes good
Funny.
content though, I must say.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Not
yeah.
the
He
most
he
proficient
made
player, but good content creator for sure.
yeah, he's funny. He's very funny, and he made one video with a classical player. I forget his name. He was amazing, and they were both playing as if they went back to like 200 years back, and then this guy just time traveled.
If he took a lesson in something BC, I think that's the video.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Not VC, not that bad, but like, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
I think I know which one you're talking about. And I think those are, I haven't seen the video, but I have seen his content in the past, right? And I actually like what he does.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I actually do
Definitely.
like what he does.
Definitely, but I think that was basically a satire. I think like it was purposefully done to make him look bad. Because what this guy is playing, and after that, he's just bending a few lines. He's like, "What is this even music?" Like, that was his reaction to the blues and
You
stuff.
and I have both known people throughout our lives who were like that. I still have, like, I've had students who were like that, and then after taking lessons, their mind just completely changed. And they used to think, oh, blues, that means, like jazz means like you are up there. If you're a blues player, like whatever. I'm like, no, bro. No, not at all.
Mhm.
Listen to
In
the
fact, I think the blues is the first place where you actually get to know playing over changes, because, like in pop music, at the end of the day, you're just in one particular key most of the time, right? With minor amount of changes, very little changes. And blues is where, like, when you basically shift into a different chord and a different sound comes, and then a turnaround happens. And so,
It's like playing
definitely, I
between
mean,
changes and playing in form as well. Like it's literally a staple. It's like 145 in pop music. Except Rai also 145. But then with different chord qualities, you are getting like different, just a different palette of sounds to play with. So yeah,
yeah, yeah. Maybe you can touch upon this aspect a little bit. Like that's where I can talk about modal music, right? Like, I mean, everything is modal at the end of the day. Like there is some mode that you are playing and something, right? But if we kind of go into this direction where this whole movement came about, this free jazz kind of thing, right? And right now, I think that the music world is basically kind of in a transformation, because it's not yet decided that what is the music of this era, right? Like I remember clearly that, like, when I was in school, I used to listen to the Linkin Park and all those guys, right? And some metal stuff as well, right? I was a big fan. I'm still a big fan, of course, of John Mayer, let's say, right? So he's that's a phase kind of thing happening, yeah. And similar things basically happened in the most sophisticated world back in the 60s and the 70s, when Miles Davis first basically came up with kind of blue, right? And from there onward, he went very different, like I would put it. It's like,
especially Bitches Brew, for example, that guy.
oh, that,
Even Porter,
right.
towards the end of his life, went more towards free jazz, adding cadenzas in his live performances and all that. I think that's a
Yeah.
very dangerous topic to talk about. Also, it's like
Go ahead, man. I mean,
it's a
I
pretty
like
dangerous
dangerous.
topic because it's very easy to sound like you are showing a middle finger to every other style of music. But then I promise you that's not what I'm trying to do in any possible way.
I'm gonna wear
In my
this.
books, there are a few styles of music which require you to constantly work on yourself, not just as a player, but also your personality, your thought, your philosophy, etc. Right? And three of my favorite such styles is number one, jazz. I think that's what I relate to the most. Number two is 18th century Western classical music, like
Mm,
Bach, Debussy, etc.
mm.
And Hindustani classical music. And I'm guessing Carnatic as well. Just the thing is, I am not as knowledgeable, not even half as knowledgeable about Carnatic as I am about Hindustani music, just because I've just had a little bit more exposure to that comparatively. So, hence, I don't want to add any other style of music just because I haven't gotten into them as much. Right. Now, these three styles of music really requires you to treat art as what we call sadhana in Bengali, you know, which
Yes.
basically means, I guess, dedication, like
Yeah. Yeah.
constant practice, right? I have had multiple friends whose parents were Indian classical musicians, like they've traveled the world playing like traditional Hindustani music.
I see.
And these people are doing their riyaz every single day, every single day, right? Whereas other styles of music also has a lot to do with people not going so much depth into their art, at least in terms of playing an instrument. They're probably going in a different way, which I'm not aware of, but then I'm just talking from my perspective, like speaking from my perspective as a guitar player and as somebody who's very passionate about improvised music. Like that kind of improvisation will only come out of you if you have spent enough time analyzing, working on, and creating little bits and pieces of music and ideas for yourself, right? You know how, like, when we were young, we used to have. Sorry,
Oh,
that's me.
sorry.
When we were young, we used to have these services on our cellular platforms, word a day. Did you ever have that?
Rem- Tell me more.
So basically, every morning you would get an SMS on your phone, which would just give you a
Ah,
word and the meaning, whether it's a noun, an adjective, or whatever, right?
right, right,
Now,
right, right, right,
we
right.
did that why? To basically build more vocabulary for ourselves. You know. So
Yeah.
in music, sadhana is basically that to me, where like every day you are building some kind of vocabulary and you're just like upping your knowledge a little bit every day, right? Strictly related to your art, but obviously you're also trying to connect dots. That's how I see it. And jazz, Hindustani classical music, and Western classical music are these three styles where I have seen that just because I have had more exposure to these three things. Like Western classical and jazz at Berkeley, Hindustani classical through just my own endeavor. Whenever I can, I just look into these things myself. So these things required you to really learn to train yourself in a way where you are able to portray yourself into your sound or your art, if that's making sense, right? Like
Yeah.
it's almost like when you're playing, you're speaking only. It's just that you're not using a mouth anymore. Right? You're just translating those thoughts in a different way through an instrument, and because you've managed to connect certain dots, you're able to do it a little bit more naturally. I don't know
Yeah.
how much sense I'm making. That was like a
Maybe,
mouthful.
maybe on this tangent, like, why not you take us back a little bit to the time? Because now, like, we spoke a few times, I think, after you went to Berkeley, right? And that time you used to give out these videos with coffee break grooves or something like that. That was
Yeah,
like yeah, I remember some of those stuff. Like I still listen to them. Like they're so nice.
still there somewhere on the internet.
Yeah,
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 I think
yeah,
I should email that guy. I haven't made a video for them in quite a few years.
yeah. You should, you should, you should. I mean, like that was basically kind of a time, right, when you were learning a lot of stuff, lot of information was being given to you and like thrown at you almost like that, right? I mean, just to portray a like the complexity of it, like if somebody just tells us that like there are only 12 notes, man, how difficult can this thing be? I mean, it's not just about the 12 notes. I mean, it's also about time. When you introduce time, then the complexity becomes infinite because you have added another dimension into it,
And
right?
then octaves.
Octaves, absolutely, absolutely,
I mean, the octave
absolutely.
is still the smaller dimension. Time is really the bigger one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Time is a dimension where basically, if like from a dead piece of paper, something comes into life,
Right.
right? Like you're playing in with life now. So, what were the mindset changes basically happened because somebody who is going through a similar kind of a transition phase, I mean, might want to know that probably. Like,
Um, you know how like see, I'm not a very like God kind of spiritual person, but I do believe in spirituality to some extent. And
yeah.
there's a saying in the Gita or something, I think, जो भी होता है अच्छे के लिए होता है. ठीक है. So I think every event that's happening in your life, no matter how happy or sad it is, it's there to teach you something. And it's your job to really figure out what the lesson was. You know.
But were you at that similar mindset of quietness at the time when the things were thrown at you?
No. I was number one, much younger. Number two, not as patient as I am today. I'm still a kid, man. I mean, anybody who knows, my wife has to deal with me, on a daily basis. I am a kid in my own way. But yeah, I do have a lot more control over my life and my decisions just because now I'm the one paying bills and everything. Uh, but back then I was definitely not as grounded as I am today. So when one is really like so much of information is being thrown at that person, it's natural for that person to really feel overwhelmed about it. And I felt overwhelmed myself.
Sure.
But the trick is really to tell yourself and to make yourself understand that all of these things that are being thrown at you are really the same thing, but said in a more complex or simpler manner. In that the thing I said earlier, where everything is really the same thing but different, connecting dots. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just try to connect the dots between everything. Like if I have to give you an example, in pretty much any music school, like music college rather, you have a mixture of core classes like ear training, harmony, private lesson for your instrument, ensembles if you're performance major, sometimes business and all of that, right? Now, let's say harmony, ear training, private lesson, and ensemble, right? All of these four classes are quite literally training you to do one thing, become a player, right? And they're actually teaching you the same things, just in different ways, because all of these different perspectives are going to teach you how to adapt to different situations. But they're teaching you the exact same thing. Your training is also teaching you skills, harmony is also teaching you skills, right? Your private instructor is also teaching you skills, and your ensemble is where you're applying everything. So you're still learning skills or whatever, like any of the devices that are being taught, you're essentially learning to use all of that, and that is building a vocabulary for yourself, that's building a voice for yourself, right?
Yes.
Am I making sense?
Yes, 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 absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean,
So every person who is in that kind of a stage, it's very important for them to really tell themselves that I have to try and simplify things. Just
Mm,
because
mm,
something sounds
mm,
complex doesn't necessarily mean that I have to see it in a complex way, right? You know,
mm.
and this I had actually, like, I went to a school that was dominated by Marwaris and Gujaratis. Right? I went to Birla High School. This is a very common thing amongst them. Like, if you try to explain something to them, like at least all of the ones that I know, if you try to explain something to them in a long sentence, they're like, भाई सीधा बोलना, you know, सीधा बात बोल. Just, and then, like, if you actually try to simplify, then you're like, huh, like, why didn't I just simplify it that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like, think of it this way. You can learn 50 different skills if you want to, right? But what
sure.
if you learn one skill to such an extent that you can just alter it however the hell you want to?
Mm,
Isn't that what the other 49 skills are,
mm.
right? And then what are these skills? These skills are nothing but a framework for you to hear a sound that can be created when there are certain combinations working together.
Okay, okay. I mean, I have one question on this part. Like, we talked about literature, right? Like, how was this? Because in order to understand this one skill that completely exhausts the other 48 or 49, right? You have to go through plenty of literature, like songs, I mean, right?
If you only went from A to Z well and then learned what A to Z sounds
Right, right, right,
like
right.
abacus, right?
Yeah,
You know that C, there's a C there, there's no K there, but we're saying abacus.
sure, sure,
So these are like little things you will learn with experience, right? But then let's say if you're saying Cisco, you know, the brand Cisco,
sure.
CIS.
I mean, Germany, why not Germany?
Exactly.
Right.
Right. So if we are learning the sound of these alphabets and then certain dialects of these alphabets as well, because that's really what they are, at least the way I'm seeing it, like Germany and Germany, right? I would see the two as like two dialects of the same alphabet, right? So what if instead of learning lots of literature, I am learning these alphabets to the core and I'm keeping an open mind that, you know what, sometimes instead of saying ga, I'll say grr.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
What if I do that? You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, a question is rising in my head, but I don't know if I will be politically correct, but I'll try. Okay.
I
So,
think one question that you or anybody else might be thinking is that is this what formal education is supposed to teach you? Technically. But is this what formal education is teaching you? No. Formal education is literally teaching all of these skills, and those are there for a reason, right? Those are important to know if you're trying to be a music educator or a session player, or let's say actually in most of these two cases, or even as a composer. I think these knowing all of those skills are important if you're any one of these three people. But if your aim is to only create, I think you can simplify it to quite an extent, which is why I do not teach everybody the same way, because it makes no sense to do that. If
mm,
somebody wants to go deeper into that, then we'll go through it.
right, 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 right. But what about the intrinsic quality in this particular thing that you spoke about, the dialect, basically, the dialect, right? Like, I just have to choose one language. I mean, I don't want to be biased or about it, but let's take Bhojpuri. Okay. Now, it doesn't like, I mean, the music is not tasteful at all. The pop music of Bhojpuri, right? It's not tasteful. So now that might be politically correct or incorrect. I don't care. But there have been interesting literature written, poetry written in Bhojpuri. I'm very sure about that, which is very good quality. Okay. So when there is a kind of speaking which you are doing that kind of sounds like nice, like and then there is something kind of cheesy. Okay, like you understand what I mean, right? Like, I mean, and that's where I think, like, at some point of time, if you want to be a serious musician, you have to graduate into this category somehow. Like, I hate to put a very hard line here, especially with a regional racial kind of a sentiment. I don't mean it at all. I could have taken any other thing as.
That's the first thing that just came to your mind. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, can you expand on that a little bit?
See, as a full-time musician, I am a bit of an elitist when it comes to jazz, obviously, or like when it comes to music in general, you know that, right? And I am I am happy to call myself a snob. Nobody can change that. I don't care if somebody calls me a bad person for that. They can go to hell for all I care. However,
Sure.
as a full-time musician, just because I'm a snob, that does not mean that I keep a narrow mind towards music. I'm a snob because I have gone through quite a few different styles of music over time, and certain things are a lot more intellectually challenging, physically challenging, or whatever challenging than others. And just FYI, pop music has its own challenges too. You know. Now,
Sure.
let's take Bhojpuri for example. You are right that to most people, especially outside of that region, that's probably going to sound like it's going to sound comical, right? Now, the
Yeah.
thing is, why is it sounding comical? Because there are lots of like digital drumming beats going on, lots of like high level of auto tune being used, like quite a high level of auto tune being used. But you know what? I will actually say positive things about it.
Okay.
One, we have to understand that every region has a certain personality. We're from Calcutta. Calcutta has its own personality, right? You are talking
Mm.
about being late. You and I are in time probably because we have been exposed to people who are on time and who know how to value time. My dad values time like crazy. If my dad says he's on time, he means he's on time. You know, at Berkeley, attendance is not a joke. Okay, like I had to maintain about 98% attendance, man. 98% attendance. Right? And then there are people going to Bhaggu who never even go to college. Okay. So yeah, I had to go there, and the Berkeley actually teaches a very like interesting sentence. If you're not 5 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. That is the motto that you should follow. That's what Berkeley did. But I mean, I was anyway on time and all of that. But in Calcutta, you and I both know nothing here runs on time. Nothing. Over time, I have found certain people I work with who are on time and who know how to value time. And from my experience, most of them learn to value time either because they have spent some time outside of the city, or they belong to a family who are very disciplined from that perspective, or like let's say they have started their own business. Like I feel like when you are trying to do something of your own, you really learn to value time a lot more, you know
Right.
whether it's
Right.
as a freelancer, as a businessman, whatever, because time is money, and time is money. That is reality, you know so, similarly, that region also has its own personality, and that sound sounds like that personality, right? You and I have both known people from that region,
Sure.
and just like every other region, there are bad people, there are good people, right?
Sure. Sure.
Now,
Sure.
why do we make fun of them? The thing is, they also make fun of us, right? North India makes fun of Bengal also. Bengal also makes fun of North India. South India makes fun of North India. North India makes fun of South India. This divide has been there in India for centuries, right? But if we keep that stupidity aside, when
Yeah.
it comes to reality, that is the beauty of our country. Right? That is the beauty that this region sounds like that. Then you go to South, and then there are different regions where even their sound is slightly different from each other. These are musical dialects, right?
Yeah.
And also, even like Bhojpuri also has its own traditional form, I believe. They also have their own folk music. Even Marathi music is there. I know. So it's really about personality over there. It's really about where the music is coming from, right? Take Punjabi music, for example, Bhangra, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Bhangra also a lot of people make fun of. But then, man, like when I used to drink and people put on Bhangra, I was in the mood, bro. Like, come on. Right? And that's what the music is for, right? The specific kind of music you're talking about, people are dancing to it, man. They're dancing hardcore to it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Because even Latin music is dance music.
Sure, completely.
Swing at one point was also dance music, right? So if we can see that from a positive side, we should see this also from a positive side. Will I play that? Maybe not, unless somebody is paying me quite a bit of money for that. But then, yeah, from my own mind, yeah, I'm probably not gonna play that because I won't say it's because I see it as a lower thing.
Sure.
I really just don't connect to it as much. You know.
Sure, sure. In fact, Dialmate AI, like the project that I'm working on right now, the one of the fundamental goals is to make this cultural boundaries, like connect these cultural kind of differences that we have. Like I've been in the south of India, right? And it's a completely new country to me. It was like I felt like that. Like nothing seems like how it is back in.
Even North, no? There are certain places of Northeast who are also like that. And
Yeah, yeah,
this also like at one point you mentioned where in this generation has not found its sound yet. And that's
yeah,
mostly
yeah.
because there is a lot of fusion going on, I think.
Uh-huh,
You know,
uh-huh.
like if you go back to that whole idea about free jazz, which you were wondering, like which you were talking about, there was an era in Western classical music also, the expressionist era, where things went a little interesting. And then Europe also has the culture of free improvisation, which is what I am more into than free jazz. Like free jazz has its own language, whereas I think free improvisation is a little bit more open comparatively. You know,
Can you name a few players like who are into like from the European part of the world? Mhm.
there's this guy called Wolfgang Muchspiel. I can't really pronounce his name. He's a guitarist. Really, really, really. But I think in Europe, the thing is, I follow a bunch of groups on Facebook where people just post videos of their live performances. So there is a video called sorry, there's a group called what was it called? I think it's called Free Improvisation only or Free
Okay.
Form Improvisation, something like that. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing is, in this group, everybody is not a musician. Some of them are actually comedians as well. Like comedians are actually more free form improvisers than a lot of musicians. So
Mhm.
they actually
Yeah.
understand the idea of free form improv more than a lot of improvisers do. Right? So yeah, a lot of comedy is improv. Right? Then dance, there
That's
are freestyle dancers also. So it's like a very interesting kind of groups, and these are the kind of places where I ideally like to gather my inspiration from because um, coming back to another point you had made, fame, right?
yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't particularly feel that fame makes an artist as good as the fame suggests the artist is. Right? I'm not saying that Kurt Rosenwinkel is great. Of course, Kurt Rosenwinkel is a monster of a player, right? And I love his playing. But I would still rather listen to somebody who is at home, who has a different source of income from somewhere, but puts in even more hours than Kurt Rosenwinkel. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Right?
Right. Right.
It's not like this person is better than Kurt Rosenwinkel. The kind of thing that Kurt Rosenwinkel can do, this person will probably not be able to do that. But the only reason why I would be in like more into these kind of musicians is because I feel when you're trying to be a full-time musician, no, a part of your thought process will be influenced by the people, like by the crowd. You can call
Mm.
me a negative person, you can call me old-fashioned, whatever you want, but I feel that as an artist, you got to be selfish, man, in terms of your thoughts, right?
Mm. Mm.
Why should I let the crowd fine tune my art? That just does not really make that much sense to me. I'm not saying that it can't bring good things to me. All I am saying is that isn't it supposed to be an individual journey? You know?
Mm.
So if it's
Mm.
supposed to be an individual journey, why should it be influenced by my work?
Mm.
Like
Mm.
what I played in front of you by myself, that was me. I felt connected to my instrument over there. When I am playing with my bands or in a venue, I still have to hold back certain ideas. And that's mostly because of one, the crowd slash venue owners. And number two would be every musician you play with are not gonna have like similar mindset as you, right? So
Sure.
there will be some kind of divide. So you will have to be a little mindful about who you're playing with also, right? Somebody else is probably a wild Carnatic player. I don't know Carnatic, you know. So
Sure.
in that
Sure.
situation, what we're gonna try and do is just like play with each other. Like I'll try to add to that person with whatever capacity I have. Right. So obviously there you'll have to hold yourself back to some extent. If I'm teaching music, I am lucky enough to really get a lot of students who take lessons from me to learn my way of looking at things. So I don't feel as limited in those situations, but I have taught in schools in the past, right? Music schools as well as I've taught in a high school also. And there I felt really, really limited, man. Like, sir, can you teach me something that's interesting? Like, bro, like I find everything interesting. Why can't you find everything interesting? Like, what is the definition of interesting to you? Like, you wanna sound like Tom Quayle, but you can't play Happy Birthday, bro. Like, come on. Like some effort needs to be put. I can simplify things to a great extent, but then the thing is, I can't change the fact that any instrument is not easy to play unless you're playing a triangle. You know what I mean? Even a triangle can be hard to play if you want to get your rhythm right.
I mean, you cannot sleep, right? Like you have to play that on time. So,
Yeah, exactly. It's not just gonna randomly play for you. You know what I mean? Like the whole idea about playing an instrument is that, you know.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah, that's basically my point. So I've probably ended up hurting a few people saying these kind of
Mhm.
words. But then I think just like others, I am also entitled to my own opinion about it. Especially considering that this opinion is just based on about 15 to 20 years of interaction, learning, and hands-on live experience in general. And I have still felt that anytime I have, like, there was one point of my career where I have not performed at all. I was only teaching. I had felt a lot more like myself when I was only teaching and not performing, right? On stage, I don't really feel like I'm myself completely. Apart from
Interesting.
certain rare situations where I played solo gigs. In solo gigs, I do feel like myself there. But then in any non-solo gig, I don't think I'm ever myself completely. It's always influenced by the crowd or the people I'm playing with.
Right, 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 right. Like I want to kind of point out here a little bit, like on and your thoughts on this. Like your major was in performance, right?
It was initially contemporary writing and contemporary writing and production. And then
Okay.
after I think a semester of two of that, I switched to performance.
Right, right. So I want to learn a little bit, maybe through an example, like of a very common tune, like anything, you can pick up any standard or something like that. Like, what is a good performance? Like, what are the things that you have to keep in mind, and when you have to perform, right? Like, it's a different game altogether compared to when you are in your at your house in your pajamas, and like nobody's listening, you're completely free in your head and you're just doing your thing. I mean, that's the best thing ever. So yeah, like, tell us a little bit about performance as a as a feature, essentially, and what are the like subcategories in this category of things.
Let's say autumn leaves, right?
Autumn leaves, oh, great
Yeah,
tune.
autumn leaves. So let's say till there. If I have to ask you which part of it was an appropriate performance and which part of it was inappropriate, right? What would be your answer?
Oh, I mean, what is appropriate?
Exactly,
I
right.
mean, what like,
What is appropriate and what is inappropriate? So it really depends on the listener, right? If somebody is trying to listen with an open mind, they're not gonna think about that performance thing like "Arey yaar, maza nahi aa raha hai" and all that. Whereas if you're playing in front of somebody who is really more of a consumer of music than a listener of music, then your playing
yeah,
will be slightly different, right? So here, how I started it off, that is
yeah,
probably what I would maintain for the most part if I'm playing in front of the latter, right? And if I'm playing in front of somebody who I know clearly is there to listen, then I think that
yeah.
really motivates me and it inspires me to go out of like the whole idea of this
Yeah,
particular.
I was gonna say that, like, the second aspect of it, like, you shifted a little bit of the gears, and then, like, but to me that was also music. So I mean, so I don't have any problems with
Won't be
that.
to everybody. That's the thing, right?
Mm.
Especially, let's say if I now take the same tune and I try to go somewhere else with it. Right. So I got a little carried away with
Mm.
that.
Yeah, that's nice, man. I mean, yeah, that was spicy, very spicy.
Yeah, so like for me at least, it's really more of like who I'm playing in front of. That really inspires me quite a bit in that moment. And I think the venue also has a little part to do in that inspiration thing. Like certain venues now, when you get on stage, you feel inspired. It's almost like that venue is nurturing creativity for you. I don't know if that makes sense.
Like say more on that.
Like if I think of a venue like Skinny Moss Jazz Club, every time I play there, it's meant for creativity. You know, similarly in Goa, I played at this venue called Hideaway. You know, very very creative place, and I felt so creative in that venue. And in both these venues, the one thing they both have in common, one same curator, that's Nishit. I think Nishit is he's probably not the curator, but he is. They work together, as in they collaborate. Hideaway and Nishit.
I
And
see.
second thing is great crowd. Both the places have a really good crowd. Even Piano Man Jazz Club, specifically the Delhi one. You know, so I haven't played in like as many venues as many other veteran musicians have, but then these three venues have really stuck out to me from that perspective. Even Shisha Jazz Cafe actually in Pune, and another such place is Blue Bob Cafe in Bombay. In all of these are all none of these are big stages, you know. These are all small cafes or bars, but the people there who come to listen to you, they really come to listen to you, you know. And I think that really plays a big part in how inspired I feel on stage. And also sometimes, you know, when you play with certain musicians, you feel a lot more inspired also. If
Yeah,
if another player is also really like fucking with you on stage, and then you like in a positive manner, you know, not to just like put you off the like rail track, just more of like, you know, just poking you a little bit and you're also poking back. So it's like I think people also enjoy that a little bit more because I think especially the listener crowd, when they are seeing that the musicians are interacting with each other and they're having fun, I think it's a pretty nice visual aspect for them. And the
yeah,
music
yeah.
obviously has a direct impact on that, you know. So yeah,
Right,
quite a
right.
big explanation for your question, but
Yeah, I mean, I can go on tangents, like, but what I want to do is like, I mean, I want to do for more sessions, definitely with you. I can definitely see that. But we are almost at the end of this episode, so I want to kind of do something silly, right? So I'll give you a name of a musician, and you tell me 1 to 2 lines, short lines about how it inspired you or what you feel about it, what comes in your mind, let's say. Yeah. So I'm gonna like
Go for it.
Start. Ted Green.
One of my biggest influences in today's time. The reason I have a T style guitar here is because of him. I think Ted Green, how I was saying that musicians who are who already have their finances sorted from a different avenue and they're just at home practicing, Ted Green is that guy to me. Ted Green wasn't as much of a performer as much as he was an educator. I think he was one of the founding members of Musicians Institute, which at that point was known as GIT, Guitar Institute of Technology, right? And
Mm.
he has taught numerous students. He called himself a researcher rather than a musician, and yeah, so he speaks massively with me for sure.
Absolutely. Okay. Joe Pass.
I think Joe Pass was sort of like I accidentally ended up sounding like him when I got into chord melody. Because I
Mm.
guess when I was getting into just like jazz chord melody in general, I just ended up listening to a lot of Joe Pass. So he's had his influence on me. So a lot of these chordal movements that I have, it's really influenced by him.
Right, right, right. Bill Evans.
Bill Evans, very lyrical pianist, Bill Evans is, I think, I mean, see, piano players might disagree with him. I'm not a piano player, but then if somebody is getting into jazz, Bill Evans should definitely be on their playlist, you know, and not
Right.
just his solo albums, but every album that he's been featured in, also from Miles Davis albums to Charlie Parker albums as well.
Jim Hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, 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 right. Steven Wilson.
Steven Wilson, I actually haven't heard much of. Um, but I used to play. I have a friend Dhruv. I used to play quite a lot with him in Boston. He was a huge fan of Steven Wilson, so that's really the closest I have been to having any relation with Steven Wilson. But yeah,
Okay. Keith Jarrett.
I uh, I think I connect with his philosophy a lot compared to any other jazz pianist. Maybe I haven't heard enough jazz pianists, but considering the number of freely improvised albums that guy has, I think he speaks a lot. And
Yeah, yeah. I must also say this that when I wrote my master's thesis, you write the first contributions like who means what to you. The first thing I wrote about was Keith Jarrett.
yeah, yeah,
So
wild player,
like,
man, wild.
that man has given so much, like given me so much. Like,
Even in today's time, he's half paralyzed, but with one
oh
hand,
yeah,
that guy can literally throw so many pianists out into the dust. It's crazy. It's insane. You've seen that interview of his with Rick Beato, right?
yes, yes, yes. But I think he will not play anymore, right?
I don't think he's playing live anymore, but then in that interview, he was just playing with one hand, man. One hand. And that was ridiculous how intricate the playing was. It's crazy. That, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ella Fitzgerald.
I think one of the most influential jazz vocalists, definitely. Both the vocalists I play duos with are heavily, like, heavy fans of her. Heavy, heavy fans of her.
Right. And maybe also, like, I would like to add Frank Sinatra.
Frank Sinatra, not. I mean, the thing is, I haven't. Most of the Frank Sinatra tunes are really jazz standards, which he actually made popular. Like, for example, Fly Me to the Moon and The Way You Look Tonight. I don't think either of them are his tunes. So I haven't really heard him as much because I've really just heard his versions of standards. And those standards I had like heard from other people, like as in other artists as well. So I don't think I've heard too much of Frank Sinatra. But definitely a very unique voice for sure. Very
Yeah.
unique way of singing.
Very film-like voice in my head, you know. So yes. West. West Montgomery.
Wes Montgomery, I think a very unique guitar player. I don't think I have gathered too much of influence from him, but I've heard a lot of him for sure. Right. His thumb picking technique, too good. Too good.
Right.
Too good and too unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott Henderson.
Huge influence on me, man. Huge influence. There was one part of my career where I think for about 2 years or 2.5 years of my life, I had used a lot of whammy bar. It's because of that guy, not Steve Vai, that guy. Because that guy makes the guitar sound like a harmonica, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he can play over giant steps also simultaneously. That's the crazy part.
Yeah. 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 Hiram Bullock.
Haven't heard much of him.
Mhm. Mhm. Michael Jackson.
I think Michael Jackson is he shouldn't be called king of pop. He was really more than just a king of pop. I think he was a brilliant vocalist. I'm gonna keep the controversies aside. I don't think
Sure. Sure.
yeah, I'm gonna keep all of that aside. I will just speak about him from the perspective of an artist. I think he was a brilliant singer, brilliant dancer,
Mm.
and he has created a lot of gems before leaving this planet for sure. In
Absolutely.
fact, I feel more cover bands should add his songs in their set
Yeah.
list. There actually aren't too many cover bands. Like Michael Jackson's song in a cover band usually means that Thriller. Because when you want अरे यार like कुछ दमदार बजाओ like up tempo बजाओ up tempo मजा नहीं आ रहा है. But the thing is, he's got so many beautiful, intricate songs also, which really touch you. But then cover bands can't play that. That's the thing. Yeah.
Right. 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 Man, what a great pleasure. I mean, this was fun.
Likewise,
This was
man.
fun.
I mean, I'm glad at least we got to catch up. It's been like so long.
Right.
It's been so long.
Yeah. 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 I think like it's been years again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We usually catch up this way, but at least, we're catching up. The universe is bringing us together in some way or the other. So, yeah, I mean, thank you for
Definitely.
having me, and this was a lovely, lovely conversation. And I'm glad this conversation is gonna be on YouTube forever,
Yeah.
unless you
Yeah. Yeah.
decide to delete your channel, which I hope you don't.
No, no, there's no plans in that direction. So
Yeah.
it will be uploaded basically. And yeah, definitely. It would be like after the editing and everything. So definitely. And, but
Awesome.
I can definitely see talking to you about more nitty-gritties about culture, especially in the Indian subcontinent. I mean, culture is going to be a very important topic probably because I feel there is something missing out there, you know. And I mean,
Culture can also be a very dangerous topic to talk about, to be very honest. Like,
so
because
if we don't speak,
everybody
then
gets offended with everything also.
right, like my personal philosophy is if we don't speak about dangerous topics, those it will actually become more dangerous, right?
That is also there, but like there are like problems with that also. That's the thing. Like I think especially on these kind of like podcasts and video platforms in general, like even on my YouTube channel when I'm making lesson videos and anything, I really make sure that I choose my words carefully.
Sure,
Because
sure,
it's
sure.
not like talking to a friend. Because you never know.
Definitely,
And the thing
definitely.
is, yeah, I understand. Like, it really, everybody does have a different background, and certain words can affect them in a very negative way, very, very negative way. So, yeah, people can definitely get offended, which is why talking about cultures can become very, very dangerous.
I also want to add AI in that picture. basically, because that's a very new element there. So I'm gonna catch up with you very soon on this next series of conversations which we will have, because frankly, man, this is something I can do forever. Okay, I just like to talk. Okay, and listen
And yeah, this
basically.
was a good conversation, man. I mean, it's not like, considering that guitar players usually talk about tone and harmony, this was a little beyond that.
Sure,
Because
sure.
I don't think enough people talk about the philosophy behind improvised music in general, just like art in general. So I'm glad that we had such a nice, long, positive conversation about it. I don't think, hopefully, nobody felt that we showed a middle finger to somebody, but yeah,
Yeah, at least it was
somebody
not intended.
somebody feels that way, please, like, that is not what I meant. Don't cancel me and all that. I think now I'm probably showing a middle finger, but ठीक है, like, just don't cancel me and all that. Yeah. Awesome, man. So lovely speaking
Magnum,
to you,
Magnum.
and yeah, we'll catch up again.
Definitely, bro. Definitely. So, yeah, man, let's catch up. And please do send me these files. Huh?
Absolutely. That I record.
Ekdom, ekdom.